Hey, left or left, right, out. So let's. I was going to get into some market stuff and whatever, but I just got made aware of an interesting tweet by Adam Kinzinger, that anti or not never Trumper, and he's been a big proponent of like the no fly zones and whatnot. And he called. It was a weird tweet. I should have took a picture of it, but it was saying that we should go after Belarus because they're not a member of the Warsaw Pact, or they are. Or I can't remember what he said. Pretty much, insanity. And or yeah, I was like, they're not a member of the Warsaw Pact anymore, or something like that. With the Warsaw Pact, has been gone since the '90s, and they are allies of Russia. So if you attack them, then you're drawing Russia into a war. So the whole thing, you can go look it up yourself. It's pretty crazy what this guy's calling for, and this guy's been off base on so many things. And the most consequential is this, when it comes to life. But let's see the update of this Ukraine and Russia conflict. The Russians are giving us a class, pretty much, or a demonstration of modern siege warfare at this point, encircling towns and trying to evacuate civilians and pretty much starving or cutting off the lifeblood of these towns. They're also warned the West that any kind of provocation through weapons transports, convoys or whatnot, they'll be considered combatants and will be targeted as such. So that's also interesting. I had some other thoughts. All these weapons that are pouring in there, I've been kind of keeping abreast on what is being poured in there, and it seems like there's just so many different weapon systems from various nations that are pouring in there. And I just, from a military perspective, my initial thoughts were is how it's pretty precarious to have so many different weapon systems in there with people that aren't necessarily spooled up or trained on how to use them. And you wonder what's gonna happen, because we spend so much time in our military training people on different platforms and different weapon systems, and you're just haphazardly throwing these weapons in there with minimal training, and conscripts of certain nature, that are going to be using these. And you wonder with some of these weapon systems, what's going to happen to them if they get it into the wrong hands. Presumably, the Russians are going to come across these things just laid down, because eventually, as you get more desperate, you have less disciplined soldiering, going on in the Ukrainian side. Also, that also lends the fact that another thought popped in my head about where's the people ask where the Russian Air Force is. I'm asking where the Ukrainian Air Force has been, and if we give them planes, which I don't know if that will happen, um, you know, either way, what if we give them planes? Like, where are all these extra pilots, and how are they going to get spooled up? I mean, we're talking about giving them MiGs or whatever that are left over from Poland, but there was even talks of Western jets. But like, where are these pilots coming from? Is there just like an excess amount of pilots that are just laying around in Ukraine, and they just don't have the planes? Nobody's really addressed this, and I don't understand what's going on there. I will continue to say, if before you come up with an opinion on Ukraine itself, or have a really hard opinion, you should watch that Oliver Stone documentary, Ukraine on Fire, which has been, you know, banned by YouTube. You can find it on RT and other outlets. It gives you a little perspective on the history of this, and you'll see why. Like, I bring up the fact that a person like Victoria Nuland, her name just keeps popping up when it comes to this Ukrainian stuff. You can also look. There's some interesting testimony by the Russians in the UN Security Council about the biolab stuff. That's interesting. Now here, let's get into the economic side of things, because this is the West is really playing some really Russian roulette, let's just say, in a sense. And I've told you, India and other nations, Turkey, they are not curtailing any of their Russian trade. China is pretty much backing. There's, when you have the Apple Pay and all these other companies that are divesting from Russia, and then them being kicked out of the SWIFT system, China is stepping up and helping them out. Now, here's a thought that occurred to me when it comes to oil sanctions, because now we have a concerted effort by the left in this country to call this the Putin tax. They're trying to label it that. And you hear Nancy Pelosi with just a really weird press conference detailing that. But there's so many charts that you can just pull up a basic chart and you can see where gas prices. Let's just put gas prices and just prices in general have just skyrocketed since Biden took office. I'm not saying I'm not going to blame it all on him. I mean, there's some other fact. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon perpetrated by the Federal Reserve and affected by the government itself. It has been going on for years. The difference is now it's in the consumer side of things. And Biden's not helping that whatsoever. But if you put the chart up when Biden took office, this is when it really started hitting. And it's been going up. And just a little tiny bit of it happened after Russia invasion. And now there's a whole PR campaign to label all this economic devastation that's occurring in this country as some kind of Putin tax or whatever, which is nonsensical to begin with. You can just look that stuff up. And just if you do any of your own research instead of just taking the propaganda from our media, which is the largest propaganda purveyor in the world at this point. What was I getting? Oh, okay, so here's my thought on this oil thing. So let's, what is it? Russian oil is like 3-something%. Let's call it, but just safely estimate 3 to 8% of our oil. We banned it. Other nations have kind of banned it, but that hasn't stopped some funds from still investing it. But here's the thing: so everybody, like the administration, has admitted oil is a global market, right? So, but there's still people trading Russian oil, and the thing about that is, so if they're still trading Russian oil, and they're getting it at a discount, by the way, just to let you know, so like Chinese and India and these other nations that are purchasing the oil. So if they're purchasing more from the Russians at a discount, they're incentivized to purchase more because of that discount. Therefore, they're not purchasing other countries' oil, and assuming that production has stayed the same, then the effect on the oil market's not necessarily the supply constraints from oil itself. The majority of a price run would be inflationary monetary phenomenon as opposed to restriction on supply, because the supply is still there. It's just being diverted. It just shifted around what countries where they're getting the supply from. So we can still access the oil market. We just get it from somewhere else, but that same amount of oil is still being pulled. It's just now China's not going to buy. They're going to buy more Russian oil than maybe oil from Venezuela or whatever, perhaps, or however that. I mean, I haven't really looked at those dynamics, but you just look at it from an economics perspective. You didn't just, by putting these sanctions on Russia, you didn't, on the global market, you didn't just take out Russian supply. So if China and them are still, in fact, probably taking more Russian supply, and they're not now in the other markets buying it, then therefore you still have the same amount of supply of oil and the same demand factors. The only difference is you're still printing money. So that's my thought. I mean, so overall, however we see this shake out. But I haven't heard anybody talk about it like that. Like, you really didn't have a whole oil supply shock there. You still have the same dynamics that are, in essence, you just shifted the chairs on the Titanic deck or whatever you want to say. It's a bad analogy, but you just shifted chairs around. What does have an effect though is fertilizer, since we are so dependent, and a lot of our fertilizer comes in. Not that you can't do that. I mean, you're gonna have certain shocks there, but those shocks are already there. Like before this happened, if you look at what happened in the cattle markets, or you talk to producers there, you talk to farmers or whatnot, these things are already happening, right? So that's an interesting dynamic, and you just got to get past that facade that the media is laying on you about what these sanctions. And in fact, I've argued these sanctions affect the average person, the average Russian, the average American more than anything. But it's also hastening, it's making it swift transition from the dollar itself. And ironically, these large globalists is another side topic that popped in my head, because I was like, well, I wonder how you get if a guy was so inclined to go buy some rubles, since they're like you can get 100 rubles for $1 or whatever. It's like, well, you can't if you're a Western person, and but you can damn sure, like guys like Soros can get in there and buy up some of this stuff in some of these larger funds, but the average person couldn't go in there. Just I remember when I was in the Marines, I bought Iraqi dinars just for the fun of it. If anything, you got them, and they're kind of like a collector's item. I did the same thing when I was in Ukraine. I got a bunch of the Ukrainian rubles or whatever they call them. I don't know how much. In fact, I tried to give them to somebody, but they won't even let me send them back over to Ukraine. to one of my friends over there. In fact, that's another thing. I talked to some people that are in Ukraine right now that live there. They have that are Ukrainian, and they're staying put. I think they're in Lviv now, but they're not going anywhere at the moment. Um, but anyway, I'm bouncing all over the place. But I wanted to put that kind of thought in your brain housing group about the economic situation and what's happening there. There's um, a lot of interesting propaganda. Fox News. Here's another thing. Last thing I'll touch on because we're already at 10 minutes. Fox News first headline or yesterday pull up the headline. Oh, journalist was killed by. Which you don't want anybody killed. That's my whole thing is I want to get civilians and journalists play a key role in there. But this journalist who worked for like the New York Times was killed over there, and they said Russians killed him, right? And that may be so. I mean, I don't know. But then you actually listen to the reporting of it, and you find out that it was in a Ukrainian controlled area, and I can't fault them because it's war, man. There's a lot of things going on, so maybe at a checkpoint or something, they looked at him as a combatant of some sort, or they're just not that disciplined because it seems though I don't understand it. I don't know what the state of Ukrainian military is, and it's very the American media really hasn't given us a great portrayal of their current status. So anyway, I don't know who killed the guy. But either way, it's a bad deal because you need journalists in there reporting, even though we're not getting that kind of journalism anymore. You get it more on the Russian side, to be totally honest. If you go look at their stuff of on the ground reporting, the West is really fallen short of doing any kind of real analysis or journalistic work on this war, besides trying to get us all to push a war or to back some kind of proxy war or even a blatant war with Russia. But that I mean, I guess last time I was like, what is the status like? So where's the Ukrainian pilots? Where's their Air Force? What is giving them planes? Which I'm not like opposed or against. If you're pro-Ukrainian, but then I mean, I'm just looking at it from a military perspective. It's like, where are these pilots? Where is the Ukrainian Air Force, and what kind of operations have they run? Why haven't we got like a real good analysis from even the Western side, like how the Ukrainians are, like actual numbers, verifiable actions, and maneuvers, just like sorties and stuff that yeah, they've been quick to put out this propaganda videos and other videos of Russian tanks, which is that's a legitimate thing, and that goes into another thing. But they haven't been quick on giving us any real verifiable information about Ukrainian forces and their movements, their victories, their whatever the case. They're just a good analysis. Brings me to another thing. So there's been guys that I listen to. They are now starting to jump on this bandwagon. The Russian military is really follied, and in a sense they did. And I'll say it this way, but this is yeah, maintenance issues probably on their vehicles. They're probably using the older ones. Yes, logistically they're not doing very well, but they are to me in a sense, and that has to do with the time of the year that they decided to do this operation. That's why things kind of haphazardly. Yes, the Russians are good at planning. They seem to plan, and they've kind of had this thing in the works, I believe, for a number of years. But they went in at a wrong time of year, especially with a mechanized based military, and using the transport tanks and whatnot. It's because we're at this point, this weird point, and they hit it. I don't know if they just anticipated it wrong or whatever. We're hitting at this weird point of time of year, that like longitude or latitude, whatever it is, that part of the globe where you have softening roads. You're coming from the frozen tundra into where you can have those days where you have those softening grounds where it's not frozen. And when you have large, multi-ton vehicles trying to get off road or whatever, you're going to have slop and mud bogs and whatnot, as opposed to going in there and invading maybe in dead of winter about a month ago or early February, or waiting till summer. That would be one of the reasons what slowed them up. But I actually think they're actually probably they're right in league with what they believe that they should be. They've surrounded a number of cities. They're conducting a modern siege warfare. Their lines on the eastern front have now all connected, so they have there's no gaps in there. I mean, the Russian controlled territory. The only thing I was like, the maybe the separatist forces aren't doing as well as they should be doing, but the Russian military itself is pretty steady or whatever. And another thing I've been asked, do you think they'll attack? No, even if they conduct this operation, there's going to have a time for consolidation. If you look at the military budgets of these things, you look at the resources that like Russia has, they can't. They're not maybe in a naval situation where you have. Can they conduct a two front war really? Because they have a formidable submarine force. Maybe not. They have one aircraft carrier or whatever, but they can only do so much. So if they're fighting here in Ukraine, they can't be fighting elsewhere. Effectively, anyway, you can only stave off enough because like the United States, even right now, we could effectively conduct probably a two front war in modern technology against a certain size enemy. Now, if you take like a China Russia war, yeah, it's kind of hard to do that, um, but the Russians really can't resource wise at the moment unless I mean, it takes a while to ramp that stuff up. So, like I said, if they when they get through this, and they're going to have time to consolidate their forces and to essentially rebuild or whatnot, just to go through their vehicles and I guess acquire additional forces. So it's going to take some time. If this is World War III, this is the first battle, and this is not going to be something that's like you look at World War II. Essentially, for us, or 1939 to 45. That's a 6 year span of all out war. You're looking at something similar, maybe a decade long of just different proxy wars or whatnot. But there's other issues in here that they would lend you to maybe take. It could go either way. But either way, the Russians will have to stop to effectively project any other power because they're going to have to consolidate and really realign their forces quickly. And so I think this operation will eventually end, and according to the Russians, are on time. And the one thing the Ukrainians have done, being the inferior force there, is they have bide time. If their plan is to fight and not really sign any peace accords, every time you get the Russians to stop and cease fire and talk or whatever, it gives you a chance to dig in, to develop defenses, to understand to disrupt the momentum of the Russian army, and hopefully give you a little bit. Maybe you find a gap or something that you can actually target and exploit. Have they done that effectively? I don't think so, but these factors of buying time helps you hopefully develop some kind of tactic that you can exploit. But anyway, I'm going to talk to you later. Peace.